General Hospital spoilers suggest that Rick Lansing is being held captive in Alexis Davis's basement. Alexis, Ava Jerome and Christina Corinthos Davis devised a plot to keep Rick there for 30 days, allowing Rick's bond to expire and losing all of the money he embezzled from Alexis. However, there may be a development that neither of them anticipated. Molly Lansing Davis, Rick's daughter with Alexis, lives in the house and can locate him in the basement. Molly Lansing Davis grows anxious about Rick Lansing's disappearance. Molly becomes anxious when she hasn't heard from her father in a while. He would not return calls or messages, which worried Molly. Molly would still be ignorant that her father is in the basement, kept captive by Alexis and Christina. She would ask Elizabeth Baldwin if she had heard from Rick, and she would respond that she had not. Everyone assumes Rick has left town, but Molly may be concerned because he is now functioning as Willow Tate's lawyer, and would not desert someone when working on a case. Molly would begin to assume Rick was missing. Molly Lansing Davis suspects Ava Jerome is involved in Rick Lansing's disappearance. Molly began to suspect that Ava was involved in Rick's unexpected disappearance. She would recognize that Ava was growing tired of Rick, and that possibly an argument had progressed to the point where she had wounded him. Ava would dispute Molly's charges and explain that she has no idea where Rick went. Molly might inform Christina and Alexis of her concerns that Ava was involved in Rick's abrupt departure from Port Charles, and they would strive to persuade her that Rick had gone. Molly Lansing Davis goes to the basement. Molly would be working at home in the living room. She could hear odd sounds coming from the basement. First she would dismiss it. However, as the noises continued, Molly became increasingly aware that something was going on down there. She would go down to the basement to investigate and be surprised to see Rick. She would be relieved to see him and eager to let him leave. Rick would explain that this is a long story and that Alexis and Christina had lied to her. Will Rick tell Molly the entire truth? What do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you think Molly will start to investigate Rick's disappearance? Will Molly find Rick in the basement? Will Rick tell Molly the entire horrible story? Keep watching General Hospital, which airs on ABC weekdays, to find out what happens next. Don't forget to come back here for all the newest General Hospital information, news and spoilers. According to General Hospital spoilers, Britt Westbourne might utilize the burner phone Jason Morgan handed her to cry mayday. Jocelyn, Jax and Vaughn are in difficulty at the Five Poppies Resort. Jason encouraged Britt to leave with him, but she refused. Stubborn Britt insisted that she had to stay and he had to leave. Can Jason save Joss and Vaughn? Jason tried hard to persuade Britt to change her mind, but she refused. In the end, he consented to depart, but not before handing Britt a burner phone for emergencies. Jason always maintains his promise, and Britt knows she can rely on him. We believe that the burner phone will now play an important role in the fate of Joss and Vaughn, who are now Pascal's hostages. Does Britt discover Joss and Vaughn? Britt knows more than she says, and Jason's presence has shaken her greatly, so she may not be thinking well. Will we see her summon Jason back to the Five Poppies Resort? Not for herself but for Joss? General Hospital. Jocelyn, Jax and Vaughn. She understands that Jason would sacrifice his life for Carly Spencer's daughter, and does not want to bear any guilt if something happens to Joss. Interestingly, Britt once saved Joss' life from Heather Weber's poisoned hook. One phone call from Britt will send Jason scurrying back to Croatia for another meeting with her. Is Britt going to rescue Joss' life again, this time with Jason's help? What happens next on ABC soap? The answer appears to be yes, which may help Carly accept her place in Jason's life. Jocelyn and Vaughn are in over their heads with Pascal. If Britt realizes they're doomed, she won't hesitate to involve Jason. But will he be in time to save Vaughn, Joss and Britt? Make sure to check in and find out. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments how you feel about Britt's homecoming. Do you think she and Jason still have chemistry, and what do you want to happen to her next? Make sure to stay up to date on everything happening at General Hospital right now. Come back regularly for the most recent GH updates, news and spoilers. Get comfortable and receive access to the best soap knowledge on the internet. Molly had always been the curious type, unable to resist poking her nose into places others would avoid. It wasn't that she was irresponsible, but there was something in her that thrived on the unknown, the subtle thrill of discovering something no one else had seen. Her family had only moved into the old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town a few weeks before, A vast, creaky antique with gabled roofs and wind-rattling windows. Everyone thought the mansion had history. Neighbors murmured about its previous owners, a reclusive couple who disappeared decades ago under unexplained circumstances. Molly didn't believe in ghost stories or small-town gossip, but she couldn't deny that the house had a particular weight, a sense that lingered in the air like damp decay. Her parents had warned her against going down the basement. "It's just storage," her father responded, his tone abrupt, as if he didn't want to talk about it anymore. "Old rubbish, perhaps hazardous." "Stay upstairs," her mother agreed, her eyes darting nervously to the massive oak door that led to the basement steps. Naturally, this piqued Molly's curiosity. She'd spent the first few weeks exploring every other area of the house, the attic with its dusty trunks, the upstairs hallway's damaged floorboards, and the hidden nook behind the fireplace where she discovered a solitary tarnished locket. But the basement beckoned to her, its barred door posing a perpetual challenge, a conundrum waiting to be solved. It was a wet Saturday afternoon when Molly decided to take action. Her parents were out running errands in town, and her younger brother was playing video games in the living room. The home was quiet save for the constant patter of rain on the windows and the odd groan of the old pipes. Molly stood in front of the cellar door, her heart pounding in her chest. She discovered the key a few days earlier, nestled inside a tin box in her father's desk drawer. It was hefty and ornate, with an aged patina, and it felt warm in her fingers as she turned it over. She looked over her shoulder, half expecting someone to catch her, but the house stood still. She took a deep breath and put the key into the lock. It rotated with a pleasing click. The door creaked open, revealing a steep stairway that led into darkness. A musty odor floated up, like damp dirt and something vaguely metallic. Molly turned on the flashlight she had brought, the brightness piercing through the darkness. The stairs were narrow and the wood sagged under her weight, so she held the railing hard as she dropped. The air became colder with each step, and by the time she reached the bottom, her breath could be seen in the cool air. The basement was enormous, far larger than she had anticipated, with stone walls that glistened slightly in the flashlight's illumination. Piles of boxes and ancient furniture were strewn about, covered in cobwebs that shimmered like ghostly lace. Molly stepped slowly, her sneakers scuffing on the dirt floor. She swept the flashlight around, taking in the jumbled mess, rusted tools, stacks of yellowed newspapers, and a cracked mirror leaning against one wall. It felt as if it hadn't been touched in years, perhaps decades. She was ready to turn back, unhappy that the forbidden basement contained nothing more intriguing than garbage, when her flashlight spotted something unexpected. A little wooden chest sat against the far wall, half hidden behind a mound of crates. It appeared commonplace at first glance, with a battered and scraped surface, yet something about it made Molly's heart quicken. Unlike everything else in the basement, it appeared to have been carefully put. She knelt in front of the chest and brushed away a thick coating of dust. The wood was dark, almost black, and intricately carved, resembling vines or tendrils. There was no lock, just a simple latch, yet her fingers paused as they moved over it. A sense of discomfort washed over her, the type of feeling you get when you're being watched. She looked about, the flashlight beam darting across the darkness, but there was nothing but the silent, oppressive weight of the cellar. Shaking the feeling away, she flipped the clasp and lifted the lid. Inside was a parcel wrapped in faded fabric and secured with twine. Molly's hands trembled as she untied it, displaying a collection of trinkets that took her breath away. There were scores of letters, scrawled in spidery script on brittle paper. A little leather journal with yellowed pages that curl around the edges. A few faded portraits of stern-faced people wearing old-fashioned attire. And beneath it all, a little metal box glinted in the flashlight beam. It felt weighty when she picked it up, and when she gently shook it, something within rattled. Her curiosity overcame her dread, and she pried open the box. What she saw caused her to gasp. Inside there was a variety of jewelry, rings, necklaces, and earrings set with deep red stones that resembled rubies. They were lovely, yet there was something disconcerting about them, the way they seemed to catch the light in a way that felt almost lifelike. A folded piece of paper was tucked in amid them. Molly gently unfolded it, scanning the words, which were written in the same spidery handwriting as the letters. The note was simple but chilling. To anyone finds this, beware. These belong to Rick. He'll come for them. Molly's gut tightened. RIC. The name was meaningless to her, but the warning sent shivers down her spine. She closed the box shut and pushed it back into her chest, her hands trembling. The basement suddenly felt too small, and the air was too heavy. She took the diary and a handful of letters, stuffed them into her hoodie pocket, and closed the chest. As she stood, a deep scraping noise resonated throughout the basement, as if something heavy had been dragged across the floor. Her flashlight beam swept around, but there was nothing but the usual piles of rubbish and shadows. Her heart hammered as she backed up the stairs, the beam of light shaking in her grasp. Molly froze as the scraping grew closer. It was coming from the furthest corner of the basement, where the shadows were heavier and thicker. She couldn't see anything, but the air seemed electrified as before a storm. "Hello," she called, her voice low and unsteady. No response, only a faint drip of water out in the distance. She took one step back, then another, her gaze locked on the corner. And then she noticed it. A flicker of movement too quick to discern, like a form darting just beyond the light. Molly couldn't wait to see more. She sprinted toward the stairs, two at a time, her lantern bouncing wildly. The scraping followed her, becoming louder and faster until it seemed like it was just behind her. She slammed the door shut, fumbling for the key to lock it. Her hands were shaking so much that she almost dropped it, but the lock clicked into place just as something heavy thudded against the door from the other side. She fell back, her breath coming in harsh gasps, and raced upstairs to her room, also closing the door. For the remainder of the day, Molly couldn't shake the feeling that she was being monitored. She kept the notebook and letters beneath her mattress, too afraid to look at them but too intrigued to discard them. That night, as she lay in bed, the home seemed to vibrate with an unusual energy. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows, and each creak in the floorboards made her jump. She continued thinking about the note and RIC, whomever he was. The necklace, so lovely but so inappropriate, tormented her thoughts. She had no idea what she had discovered, but she knew one thing for certain. She had unlocked something in that cellar that wasn't simply a chest. The next morning, Molly's parents observed her anxiety, but attributed it to the inclement weather. She didn't tell them about the basement because she couldn't find the words to describe the dread that had consumed her. Instead, she waited until they were busy before slipping the journal out from under her mattress. Its leather cover was velvety and worn smooth from years of use, and when she opened it, she discovered pages filled with the same spidery script. The entries were dated, beginning nearly a century ago, and detailed a story that chilled her blood. The journal belonged to Eliza, a previous owner of the property. She wrote about her spouse, Richard RIC, Molly realized with a start. He was a collector, preoccupied with rare stones and relics, notably a set of jewelry he claimed had power. Eliza's notes became increasingly frenzied over time, detailing RIC's spiral into paranoia and madness. He believed the jewelry was cursed, connected to something ancient and terrible, and had hidden it in the basement to keep it secure. However, the more he attempted to defend it, the worse things became. Strange noises in the night, shadows that moved on their own, and eventually RIC's disappearance. The final entry was just one line. "He's not gone." Molly's hands trembled as she closed her journal. She wanted to believe it was only a tale, the ramblings of a woman consumed by grief or fear. But the scrape in the basement and the shadow she had seen felt too real. She spent the following 3 days avoiding the cellar door, terrified at every sound, and going through the letters she'd collected. Eliza wrote to her sister appealing for help, detailing how RIC had changed and how the house felt alive with something dark. One letter particularly highlighted the jewelry, claiming it was taken from a private collector who cautioned RIC not to take it. The collector's name was scratched out, but the warning was clear. The jewelry came with a price, which RIC had paid, and Eliza feared she would as well. By the end of the week, Molly had had enough. She needed to know more to comprehend what she'd walked into. She waited until her parents were asleep before returning to the basement door. The key was heavier this time, and her hand shook as she opened it. The stairs creaked louder than usual, and the air was colder and thicker, as if it were pressing against her skin. She reached the bottom and shined her flashlight on the chest. It was still there, untouched, but the air around it seemed strange, as if it were vibrating with a faint hum she could feel in her bones. She opened the chest again, her heart beating, and removed the metal box containing the jewelry. The rubies glinted in the light, and for a brief time, she believed she saw something move within them, a flicker like a shadow imprisoned in the stones. She slammed the box shut and stepped back, her flashlight beam flashing over the cellar. The scraping resumed, slow and methodical, and this time she noticed it. A tall and gaunt man standing in the corner with the heaviest shadows. Its eyes glinted bright like rubies, as it crept slowly but steadily toward her. Molly shrieked and bolted, still clutching the package in her hands. She didn't stop until she was outside the house, standing in the rain-soaked yard, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure did not pursue her, but she could sense its presence, like a weight weighing down on her. She concealed the box in the shed behind the house, burying it beneath a mound of old tarps before running back inside, locking every door she passed. Molly was unable to sleep for several days. She kept the notebook and letters hidden, reading them often, attempting to put together what she'd unleashed. She looked into the house's history, looking through historical records online, and discovered mentions of Richard and Eliza, their disappearance, and legends of a curse on the house. There were legends about people who had lived there and vanished after discovering something in the basement. It seems that the jewelry was either the key or the trap. Molly realized she couldn't keep the box hidden forever. Whatever Rick was, he wanted it back and was not going to stop. She pondered alerting her parents, but they wouldn't believe her without proof. She considered destroying the jewelry, breaking the rubies to dust, but something told her it would only make matters worse. Instead, she decided to return it to the basement, lock it up, and hope that was enough. Late one night, she returned to the shed and took the box. The home was silent, her family was asleep, and the rain had returned, a steady pounding against the windows. She opened the basement door and descended, her flashlight wavering in her grip. The chest remained open, as if waiting for her. She slid the box inside and closed the lid, her hands trembling so terribly that she could hardly operate the latch. The scraping resumed, closer than ever, and she turned to find the creature standing at the bottom of the stairs, its crimson eyes gleaming in the darkness. Molly did not scream this time. She stood her ground, wielding the flashlight as a weapon. "Take it," she urged, her voice shaky but forceful. "It's yours." The figure remained motionless, but the air became heavier and the hum stronger, as if the walls were closing in. The figure vanished almost as abruptly as it emerged. The basement was silent, and the air was motionless. Molly closed the chest and rushed upstairs, closing the door behind her. The home felt lighter after that, but Molly never returned to the basement. She saved the notebook and letters, storing them in a box under her bed as a reminder of what she'd discovered and escaped. She never told her parents, never mentioned Rick or the jewelry, but she couldn't shake the idea that the house was watching her, waiting for her to mess up. And occasionally, late at night, she imagined she heard it, the faint scrape of something moving in the darkness far below. Britt was no stranger to danger, but this was different. The stakes had never been more personal or visceral. Jocelyn and Vaughn were somewhere in the city, their lives connected to hers by a tenuous thread of loyalty and desperation. They'd been running for weeks, ever since they'd gotten into the wrong transaction, met the wrong people and overheard the wrong talk. It was intended to be a simple job, a data steal from a low-tier business server, which they'd done a dozen times before. But the computer had more than just money records. It also housed a log of names, dates, and transactions that pointed to something much darker. A network of power that did not tolerate loose ends. Now they were the loose ends, pursued by nameless operatives who moved like specters through the city's underbelly. The burner phone had been their final resort, as Vaughn had insisted on before they parted ways. No smartphones, no cloud accounts, nothing traceable, he'd added, his voice low and frantic as he distributed the inexpensive devices in a filthy motel room.